We get asked questions all the time about the offer process. And today we have one that is quite typical, and it is all about what happens between an offer and acceptance.
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Megan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together, we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Today we're talking about how to make an offer on a property and then how to avoid the echoing silence that happens when you don't hear back from the agent. You're trying to work out, well, now what? What do I do next? All right. And what prompted this episode is a question from one of our listeners. There is so much to unpack here. We thought we'd dedicate an entire episode to it.
Awesome. All right, let's just have a little look at the question. So we have offered and we're waiting to hear back. Oh, that's such a hard position to be in. What's the barter process like? Do we counter multiple times or is it like a one and done kind of deal? Now, I love the sort of cavalier attitude in here, but I also don't because you know me, I'm risk averse and I'm process oriented and it's like, what do we do?
Well, what is so awful, and this is so common, is that people make an offer and then it dawns on them they don't know what to do next.
And have they done enough in the lead up to it?
You know,
and there's a pre-bit before the offer.
That's it. We need to. We're going to talk about the pre-work, because the reality is what happens after you make the offer is largely dependent on a lot of things that you've done before you make the offer.
Absolutely.
But what people do, they go and make an offer and then they go, and
I don't know if it's worth any more than that, or
I liken this to say you decide you want to go and play football, right? And you go and you rug up in whatever gear. Say you think you're going to be playing soccer, right? And you run on the field, you got your boots on, you got your shorts on, you got your little shirt on, you're pretty excited, and you're going to looking for that round ball and the rest of your team, and you're looking at the goals and you're thinking, hang on a minute, this soccer field is a weird shape. It's an oval. And instead of some goal posts with nets on them, there's 4 sticks sticking out of the ground at each end. And, oh, shit, these people are picking up the ball with their hands, they're bouncing it, and it's not round, right? So you run on the field to play a game you think is football. It ain't football in the way you know it. The rules are different, and you haven't actually even thought there could be another game. How could something else be called football, right?
And that is the longest analogy I've heard, but yep, I'm with you.
Do you reckon it's spot on?
I could agree, yes.
Yeah, I'm now, oh shit, the players are different, the rules are different, the ball looks different, the field
What are
looks
the
different,
rules?
the goals look different.
How do I use my hands? Can I pass it forward or backwards? This is a game where you go backwards or forwards.
Someone's bounced this ball at me and I don't know, am I offside on? I've got no idea, right?
The ball bounces weirdly. Why isn't it round? Anyway, we move.
That is what it's like making an offer on a property without having done what we're about to tell you how to do it. And what anybody who's done our course knows how to do this, right?
Absolutely.
They get this in the right order. They are in control and they know how to kick a goal.
and which direction to pass the ball. Look, the lead up is really important, and you nailed it when you said everything that you do in the lead up to making an offer is how you position yourself and the property and the offer. So everything matters in the lead up to actually making an offer. And in the lead up, you've got all of those things. So there's all these steps in your first home buyer guide, the 10 steps to how, that teaches you how to do the process correctly. Making an offer is actually step 9. Yes. Step 9 out of 10, right? I just had to double check on my list. It's step 9 out of the 10-step process.
And yet, what people do, because let's quickly run through those steps. Like step 1, your support crew. Step 2 is money. Step 3 is a plan. Step 4 is search and inspect. Step 5 is revise and correct. Step 6 is, what is that? It's methods of sale.
It's methods of sales, so understanding actually what the process is that you're engaging in. It's evaluate, so doing your due diligence and making sure you know what it's worth.
Pricing risk, yes. And then you've got getting the contract and the conditions right. That's step 8. And then you got, we'll negotiate.
Then it's negotiate.
But you know what people do? They go, sometimes they don't even plan. They just inspect. So they skip, they jump. They might do steps 1 and 2. They might just do step 2 usually. They do step 2. They jump to step 4. And then they jump to step 9. And then like, shit, we've got to go back to step 6, 7, and 8 and retrofit them.
We do laugh, but it is, we do hear it. And I guess that's one of the things and one of the joys of being in Campfire with some of our students who actually say to us, we were doing it all around the wrong way. And it is so empowering to actually know how to do it, all the steps in the right order. So let's have a look at that, because this is step 9 that we hit now. I'm not going to assume that these people hadn't done everything leading up, but for our listeners, we want to make sure that before you get to the point of making an offer and before we talk you through the offer process, you've done everything else.
Yeah.
You've got your support crew.
There's also a very key question so I'm going to give you a little freebie here, listeners. There's a key question that we teach everybody in your first home buyer guide, which they haven't asked, because if they had asked that question, they wouldn't have posted this question. And we're saving that up to the end. So stay listening for the key question that brings it all together, right? Megan's looking a bit weird because she's like, what the hell is Veronica talking about?
This come out of left field, but I'm ready for it.
You'll know it. I'm
sure we've talked about it 1,000 times. But anyway, we'll go the lead. Let's do the lead up. All right.
We're keeping everyone excited here. That's it.
The important thing is your support crew. That's number 1, right? So having everything. There's no use making an offer if you don't know how much money you can borrow. Absolutely round the wrong way. There's no use making an offer if your solicitor hasn't reviewed the contract. But there's big.
If you haven't had a building and pest inspection, if it's a house,
due diligence.
Yeah.
And due diligence and pricing is, of course, part of step 7, which is evaluate, but an incredibly important step, because if you go into a negotiation without an end point in mind, then you have no strategy on how to pull that negotiation together. And each agent will have a different process. So if you don't understand what their process is in the offer. Now, we're not talking about auctions here, right? It's a completely different process.
That's the question I was saving to the end. That's the question, which is the very one, such a critical question.
So similarly, but differently.
I was going to save it. I will articulate the question exactly at the end, but there's your little teaser. I think the thing is, though, like we were talking about, you got to get your support crew, and I mentioned building and pest inspection. There are times when you can't get that before you make an offer. So you need to have a plan, and you need to know what conditions to put into that offer to protect you for the things you can't do before you make the offer. So that's why you need a good solicitor or conveyancer. All these things need to be done in order. And sometimes when you can't, there's something else that needs to be done. And so these are the stepping stones that we put in place for you when you do your first home buyer guide. So when you go to make an offer, you're confident you can mark all those things off, right?
Yeah.
But the due diligence is something that then, I don't know if anyone's listened to every episode here, you'll know the story I told when I made an offer on my first property years and years and years ago, way before I got into real estate. And of course, then the agent rings me 2 days later saying, your offer's been accepted, which it had been, and I didn't know what happened next. And he's had to explain to me what to do. God love him. Now, very different market. if I was in a hot market, say I was buying in Brisbane today, with that happening, I would have made my offer and would have been accepted, would have been flapping in the wind, and I'm sure it would have been sold to somebody else. The agent wouldn't have called me to say, congratulations, all you need to do is this, et cetera, et cetera. The agent would be ringing me to say, you know what, you made an offer and it was enough, but somebody else actually...
You missed out.
could seal the deal and you didn't, So these are really important things to understand. And I think that's why getting, knowing what the steps are is really important, but obviously getting your due diligence done beforehand so that, once you make that offer, what then next to expect, right? But we're jumping ahead because we're talking about the bit between the offer and the acceptance. And that's the thing, isn't it?
Although there's some due diligence you can do before the offer, and that's part of the due diligence for pricing or evaluating the property, because you've got to know, you use the example of Brisbane, you've got to know if it floods or if there's overland flow, because that affects the pricing.
Yeah.
So without knowing some of these things that you can get online free of charge, you can do the due diligence, you can gather the information that you need prior to making an offer so that you know what that property is worth. And that's incredibly important, because if you get that pricing bit wrong, your first offer might be way too high or it might be way too low, and you're not going to engage the owner in a negotiation.
There'll be no gap between your offer and acceptance if it's way too high.
There will be remorse and
so the thing though,
possibly evaluation that doesn't stack up.
Yeah, you might lose everything. You also have access to our free mini course, which is, the link is in the show notes, which is how to price a property like a professional, right? And this is the thing, that too many people make offers based on what the agent has told them or what they think, I don't know, should I knock 10% off or should I do this? Or they base it on the wrong things without actually thoroughly doing their own research on recent sales to actually form an opinion as to, well, where does this property sit in the market currently? And that's what you need to do before you make an offer. And now if your offer is completely off the scale, like it's just nowhere near what it's actually worth, then you're not going to hear much back from the agent because they're not going to take you seriously, right? And so also if you haven't had some key conversations with the agent, they're not really going to take you that seriously either, right? And so without knowing in advance what the agent expects of you, it doesn't mean that you necessarily pay them whatever they tell you, but you have to understand what they expect of you, then you're not going to be able to play the game. And remember the game, the rules, like I pass the ball to you, you then dribble it a bit and then you pass it back to me or whatever, right? You don't know. I passed the ball to the agent and then he ran off with it in a different direction. I don't know what he did with my ball, right?
And suddenly a whole new team entered the competition that I didn't even know about. Yeah.
Now you're playing pickleball, right? You're bouncing off the walls. Anyway, so, no, that was paddleball. But anyway.
It's squash, isn't it?
Like, no, paddleball. Paddleball is like these hybrids, squash / pickleball. It's heaps of fun. Anyway, so all this stuff goes down, right? So my ball analogies, there'd be no end to them. But if you don't know what to expect, then you're not going to know what to expect, bottom line is. And that's why people think that you make an offer and then the agent comes back to you and then you go back to them again and they come back. They don't all do that. Sometimes they say it's best and final.
And that's a whole different process. So, and the question really was, do we counter multiple times or is it like a one and done? And you need to know from the agent how they're handling the process, how many other buyers are involved. Now, the amount of times that I hear people say, the agent told me there are other offers, surely they're just making that up to push up the price. Well, they might be, but they might not be. And the amount of people who have said, I would have paid that when they get told what the property sold to somebody else for, that's really quite unfortunate because they've completely misunderstood the rules of the game as it is being run by the agent. The agents have to work within the legislation. They can't make things up and mislead.
Some do, though.
Yeah, they have to. Doesn't mean that all of them do, but they have to work within the legislation.
They're meant to.
And that means following, a process, which is offers being presented to an owner. An owner can say yes or no. They don't have to have a reason why they accept one offer over another offer. You need to understand what are the motivations of the seller. What is it that they're really looking for? Some sellers want a really quick sale. Some want a very private, quiet sale. And some want just the highest price they can possibly get, which is most sellers. you got to understand what the seller's motivation is. If they bought something and it settles on a certain date, how you craft your offer to align with that could actually be the difference between paying more money or getting it for less.
Yeah. Do you know, and it's how some people are really sensitive to how you make offers too. I mean, the agent, you know, they're human as well, and they can take offense to things, and they can advise their client, you know, the vendor to sell to somebody else. There's all sorts of stuff that happens in the back end. And I think it's really important to understand that there's no set rule. And, you know, so it is more like Gaelic football, if we're going back to the, you know, where there's hybrid. There is so many different rules at play. One agent might do it one way and another agent will do it completely differently. And so this is your magic question. Yeah, ask the agent, how do you run offers? What is your offer process? Once I make an offer, what happens next? Now, what they should tell you... That's the vital question. That's your vital question.
Yeah.
What they should tell you is, I will pass that offer onto my vendor as soon as possible, and I'll have a result for you as soon as possible. That's what they should tell you, because legally, I think in pretty much every jurisdiction, they've got to pass offers onto their owner. Like, that's a given. There should be a given.
In a timely manner, but it doesn't say what a timely manner is.
Yeah, exactly. But
they also, I'll just add to that, Veronica, they also have to follow their owner's instructions as long as those instructions are lawful. So that means if you make an offer and the agent says the owner has asked me to present all offers by 6 p.m. Wednesday night, that's a lawful instruction from an owner. So they're not, by not passing that offer on Monday night, they're not disobeying the law because they've got a lawful instruction from their owner. But you need to work within those parameters.
Again, that's the rules, though. You just ask the agent the rules. He just told you the rules. That's the rules. And so you can try to break the rules. You can make a nightmare of yourself, and sometimes you just got to toe the line. The thing is, the next question is they say, my owner has asked for offers on 6 p.m. on Wednesday, and then what? Because do they just take the highest one and sell to that person without coming back to the other buyers, or do they then present all those to the owner? The owner says, I'm going to go with the highest one now, but see if anyone's prepared to pay more. So again, there's so many different ways that our agents can proceed with those owners. If it's a sudden death situation, say it's your best and final, then you need to put your best foot forward, because you won't get a second chance. And that's when people often regret. You don't want to be the one saying, I would have paid that. I regret not paying that. I felt like they were taking me for a ride. I didn't trust them. I didn't think the other people were real. That's what you don't want to walk away from a property thinking. But it's hard, and it's certainly in our business, it's really hard. In Queensland, they do best and best. What do you call it? Best and final.
Multiple offers, best and final. Yeah,
well, yeah, because in Queensland, the agent.
But that's not legislated. That's best practice.
Is it? So it's funny, because I was at a conference last week with a bunch of real estate agents in Queensland who told me that they cannot tell buyers the offer that another buyer has given them.
No, they can't tell them another offer. But there is no legislation around how to handle multiple offers apart from not being able to reveal the other offer.
Which makes it quite difficult.
Yeah.
So, which is probably why they go for best and final, because you can't go back to you can go back to a buyer and say, I'm sorry, but you're unsuccessful. Somebody's coming with a higher offer. The first thing a buyer's going to say is, how much was that? And then the agent's going to say, I'm sorry, but I can't tell you. And they go, was it 10 grand more? Can't tell you. Okay, well, I'm going to give you another 11 grand. And they come back to you and say, I'm very, very sorry to tell you that another buyer has put in a higher offer. This is frustrating for buyers, because you really are shooting in the dark. You know, the agent might want to give you this guidance. They can't. In New South Wales, the agent can tell you offers. In different states, they can, they can't. But also, even if they can, some agents will refuse to. No, I don't think it's ethical. I'm not going to tell you the offers. You know, so each agent will have a different way of applying the legislation depending on where they are. And this is why you just can't assume everyone's following the same rules, and why it's really difficult for buyers, and it's why you must ask that question about their process before you start the offer process. If you think that they're doing a best and final and you give them your one and done offer, and then you realise that they've just given that to the owner, and the owner is now expecting to negotiate, you set their expectations too high.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and that's come down from that.
It is, because negotiation in the absence of a multiple offer situation, so this is a really different process. If you're just making an offer, there's nobody else who's made an offer and you're negotiating, then negotiation is actually just about each party moving closer. So moving back and forth a number of times until an agreement can be reached or it can't be reached. And if that negotiation is still live, as long as each party is moving closer and closer, it doesn't matter. You know, I've heard people say, well, I moved 10,000, so they should move 10,000. It doesn't work like that. As long as the parties are continuing to move towards each other, the negotiation is live. But that generally isn't how things happen when you've got multiple people making an offer, because the right thing to do is to actually just say, put your best and final forward. The owner will consider what is put in front of them. They may or may not accept the best offer that comes out of the process.
And look, the thing too is that when you're dealing with just an owner, then you are negotiating.
Yeah.
When you are dealing with other buyers, i.e. the owner's just sitting there getting the offers, like, come to mama, bring me your offers, you know, you're not negotiating, you're bidding.
Yes.
And so even if you're not
Bidding
at
blindly.
an auction, you're bidding, right? And you're not negotiating. And it's one thing I say to my clients. It's like, we are not negotiating at the moment. We are bidding. It's very, very, very different. I'm trying to scare other people off, you know, in the process. I'm trying to scare other buyers through proxy, through the agent, you know, with how quickly I bid and the increments that I bid and all the rest of it. I'm trying to stop other people from bidding against me. And it doesn't always work because the agents, again, they've got appointments and maybe they get back to the other buyer quickly, maybe they don't. There's all this stuff. So even though I know exactly what is going on, I can't control it, right? So, but if you are bidding the multiple offers and it sort of doesn't matter, you know, you might have to go on with your best and final. It doesn't really matter where the owner is at. Because really what you're up against other people. Somebody might pay more for it. But if you made an offer and the owner, and you get nothing back from the owner and there's no other buyers on it, then that owner is probably either you've offered way too low or that owner is completely out of control on price. And so
they may need some help with their understanding of where the market sits.
They might. And some agents are really good at doing that and others are not. So you're at the mercy of how good the selling agent is at that point of time. And sometimes you just have to sit tight. And sometimes you have to not increase your own offer if you're convinced that you've done your price research and it really is good value for money and the owner is just overpriced. Sometimes it makes no sense to increase your bid under those circumstances because it's not going to help. The owner has to actually move and decide to meet the market, and then you can actually start negotiating with them.
Yeah. We did an episode recently, episode 196, and that was about emotional control. And in a negotiation is where you really have to keep a lid on your emotions. Because whilst you want to be seen as a buyer who is ready, willing and able and open to discussion, negotiation to reach a mutually agreeable outcome, that's a negotiation at the end of the day, you need to keep a lid on your emotions, because the last thing you want to be is yelling at the agent because you're not getting what you want, or the owner hasn't countersigned, and so you're really frustrated and you're taking it out on the agent, or you're calling the owner names because you know, they're not coming to the party and giving you any sort of indication. That's not going to help in a negotiation. So emotional regulation and control during a negotiation is incredibly important, particularly when things become frustrating, because you need to keep that control. You need to keep a lid on saying anything that could disrupt the negotiation process.
100%. The thing is too is that owners can take it personally if somebody doesn't offer them enough. They start forming a view of that person. Yes. They've got the whole sort of, you know, avatar in their heads about, I'm not selling that person, they insulted me. And nobody loves their house as much as they do. Nobody thinks it's worth as much as they do, right? So, and likewise, their buyers can start going, oh, that owner's a, you know, a whatever, and the agent's an asshole and blah, blah, blah. We've got a situation at the moment in my business, right? This is an agent who is notoriously shocking at negotiating. And they have
That's a
this
skill you really need as an agent, isn't it?
Oh, and I don't know. And they attract owners who want way too much money for their home. And then they just I don't know, it's a weird strategy, but they've been around for a while. They never set the world on fire, but every now and then they've got something that, a client of ours wants. So we have to go through this whole exercise. And it's really interesting because they have this thing, said before that you've got to present the offer to the client. Well, they have this thing, they do this every single time. And this is about us knowing their process. We make the offer and then we have to wait for them to arrange a meeting with the client. They sit down with the client in the client's lounge room with the written offer, which they've printed out from the email, and they sit down there and they put it on the table and they've got all their dialogue around this, and they do this every single time. And of course, then they tell the owner that their expectations are absolutely justified. They do no work on the owner's price. And then we hear crickets for days, but we know this is going on. We go, when's your meeting with your vendor?
Yeah.
When are you meeting with your vendor? So when I say, when are we going to get an answer? When's your meeting? When's your meeting? And then you ring them up. What happened in your meeting? They don't even follow us up. So, but we know this now.
So it's not really progressing a negotiation, is it?
It's a nightmare. But we've had buyers who become clients because they're on the footy field playing Gaelic football with this crowd, right? And so they're like, oh, I need help. This is hard even for us as professionals.
And all agents are different, aren't they? You're talking about
different.
A specific circumstance, but we would deal with, there's 2,500 agents roughly in Brisbane that we deal with. And they all have slightly different ways, even within the same agency. They have slightly different ways of doing things. But once you get a feel for an agent, their process, their dialogue, their script, their education process from an owner, it does make it a little bit easier to progress that negotiation. It's an interesting one. I was taught early in my selling career that the first offer that comes in, an owner will often go, "Oh, that buyer has no idea what they're doing." The second offer comes in and they go, "Oh, that agent has no idea what they're doing." And then the third offer comes in, it's like, "Oh, maybe we need to have a think about the price here." And that's where the education process starts. And certainly in a lead up to an auction, that can be a powerful tool to help an agent set a realistic expectation for the owner when they're setting their reserve. Different process to negotiation. But if you're the early offer and it's a bit low, then the owner can be offended by you, even if you're actually close to where it should be and the negotiation should take place. So it is important to know if there has been other offers.
Yeah. So, and also another good question too, when the if they suddenly say, "Oh, there is another offer," and a good question to ask is, has the vendor accepted it? Because this is the other thing. We just sort of automatically assume if there's another offer, it must mean it's going to sell. It's like not always. So.
And very different in different states because offer and acceptance is dependent on exchange in New South Wales. So there's a process to go through. You can be gazumped. You'll talk more about that. In Queensland, Victoria, it's a written offer. There's solicitors that look in conditions, and the contract is actually put together by the agent, not the solicitor, but it needs to be reviewed by a solicitor if there's conditions. If that's signed by both parties, then it's completely under the buyer's control at that point in time. So very, very, very different processes state by state, and we'd certainly go into that. We did an episode, 5 episodes on state by state differences, including the offer process.
We did, absolutely. It is very important to understand that process, and particularly when people are in one state and then buying somewhere else as well, they make the mistake of thinking that
thinking they know what they're doing.
I know how to buy property. But it's totally different. So I think, if we sum it up, right, if you have not worked out what that property is worth by doing your research before you make an offer, then you're going to find the whole process a lot more difficult than if you have done that research. Because then when you've done the research based on where you have made that offer in terms of that range of what you think is fair market value, then you've either got room to move where it's still good value, or actually you don't want to pay more than that because that does not represent value to you. So it gives you guardrails, if you like. And asking the agent that question, what is your offer process? What will you do if there is more than one offer from buyers? And what happens once your owner accepts an offer as well? What's the process once your owner accepts an offer? So it's really good for you to understand all that so you know what you're working towards. And as Megan mentioned as well, how many other buyers are there? Because if there's more than one, you recognise that you're bidding, you're not negotiating, and they're two very different things that you need to do. Both terrifying, because if you're doing this for the first time and you really want the property, it's absolutely terrifying and really emotional. And so the best preparation that you've done, the best research that you've done, the best well-armed you are, you will negotiate better. You will not throw away as much money. In fact, you don't want to be bidding against somebody who's done our course, because they will probably...
That's right. In fact, that could put you at a huge disadvantage. And we've had such an uptake of people doing the course. We're seeing a lot more first-time buyers educating themselves. And you're spot on. If you're up against one of our students who's done the course and they know and they've asked the right questions, they've done the right research, they're in a position of power, you may find yourself at great disadvantage.
What we see a lot of people when they start negotiating and they're not really sure about whether they can trust the agent in terms of when the agent comes back and they say, oh, there's been another offer, and they don't know whether to believe them, they sometimes pull out before they should.
Yeah.
And so again, we know when you're negotiating with confidence, when you're bidding with confidence, you'll know when to pull out. You'll know when to stop yourself from overpaying, but you'll also realize when you're actually, pulling out before you should buy something. Yeah. You should be buying this property and that is fair, but you haven't got the backing of that information, that knowledge. So that's
Homebuyer Academy principle number 12. Don't let the process of the negotiation impact on your decision to buy a property. Sometimes negotiations are difficult, but you shouldn't just walk away because of that.
And the other thing too is that agents can get more money out of you if you don't know what you're doing. That's the other thing. Agents get money out of buyers and buyers haven't realised it, right? And so again, being well-armed and well-researched and well-prepared will help you avoid being pressured for more money unnecessarily from an agent.
Or know that is fair enough to pay. Yeah. So it's knowing both ways. Now, have you joined our Facebook group yet? It's called Your First Home Buyer Guide Australia, and it's your opportunity to connect with us and ask us questions. You'll get answers from us, which means that you'll be sure you're not going to get led down the garden path.
And if you think that we cover everything you need to know in these podcasts, you are sorely mistaken. We do not. This is just scratching the surface. And if you really want to become an educated first home buyer, we really encourage you to check out Your First Home Buyer Guide, the course, because you need to learn all the steps in the right order and how to do everything in the right order so that you can avoid making really costly errors.
And beat those other buyers if you're up in a multiple offer situation. Your First Home Buyer Guide course only costs $990 and you get direct access to us to help guide you through your negotiations. You can share the link of any property you're thinking about buying and we can help you work through whether it's A, B or C grade or an absolute no-go zone. Trust me, you'll buy better with our guidance. And if you don't have that guidance, you could pay a hell of a lot more than $990 if you don't know what you're doing.
Very true.
In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out Your First Home Buyer Guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.